weareagoda.com.
So every single year, schools all across California have to go through this big, comprehensive health checkup. But this exam, it isn't measuring things like blood pressure or cholesterol. Nope, it's measuring the health of the entire school program. Today, we're going to go inside that high-stakes annual physical, the CalPADS Fall 2 report.
You know, it seems like a simple question, right? But the answer is, well, it's way more complicated than you'd think. It's not just about test scores, and it's not just about graduation rates. To really get what's going on, you have to look deeper at the data that shows how a school is actually working day in and day out. And that is where this comes in. The CalPADS Fall 2 submission, just think of it as the state's official high-stakes physical exam for a school. It checks absolutely everything, from who's standing at the front of the classroom to which students are getting the specific support they need. Now, here's the kind of crazy part. This massive, statewide audit, it all hinges on one single day. It's called Census Day, and it's always the first Wednesday of October. It's like a snapshot in time. Every single school in California freezes its data on this one day, which creates this consistent baseline for the entire state.
So the picture gets snapped in October, but that's just the beginning. The whole process of developing and checking that picture, it takes months. School leaders and their data teams spend all their time from October until a hard deadline in late February just checking, double-checking, and ultimately certifying every single data point.
So what's the big deal? Why is this so high stakes? Well, unlike a lot of other reports, Fall 2 has absolutely no do-overs. Zero. Once that February deadline hits, the data is locked in. Any mistakes can have really serious consequences, which is why getting it perfect the first time is so important.
All right, so let's dive into this checkup, shall we? First things first, we've got to check the vitals. And that means looking at a school's most critical resource, its people. Who's on staff and what exactly is their job?
You know, to make sense of all this across thousands of schools, the state has to standardize everything. So every employee gets a specific job code. An administrator is a 10, a teacher is a 12, a counselor is an 11. This system creates a really consistent way to see a school's workforce, no matter where you are in California. They also use this metric called full-time equivalent, or FTE for short. It's basically a way to measure an employee's workload. So a 1.0 means that person is full-time. This is super helpful for spotting errors. For instance, say you have an art teacher who splits their time between two different schools. If one of those schools accidentally reports them as full-time, it throws off all the staffing data. FTE helps catch that. And this is where the data gets really powerful, because it lets you ask these much deeper questions about equity. By calculating something called the unduplicated FTE ratio for different groups of employees, leaders can actually see if, say, certain demographics are more likely to end up in part-time jobs. This can start some really important conversations about hiring practices. Okay, so after getting that big picture view, leaders have to zoom way in. I mean, all the way down to the individual level, using a report called the staff profile. It is literally a list of every single certificated employee. So that's anyone with a teaching or services credential. They go through it line by line, checking names, ID numbers, and job status, making sure every single person is accounted for, even if they're on a temporary leave. All right, so the staff vitals are checked. Now the exam moves on to the students themselves. This is kind of the full physical part of the checkup, where we look at how students are spread out across all the different classes and programs the school offers. So one of the first things you'll see leaders look at is average class size. This report gives you that quick, high-level view that's important to pretty much everyone: parents, teachers, and of course, administrators. You can see right away how the student load is distributed across different subjects like English, math, and science. But here's the thing, you always have to remember about averages, right? They can hide a ton. A nice, healthy-looking average can totally mask some really unhealthy imbalances happening just beneath the surface. To get the real story, you've got to dig deeper. So this is where the real detective work begins for school leaders. First, they look at what's called disaggregated data. That means data broken down by specific student groups, like race or income level. They're looking for equitable access. Are some groups underrepresented in advanced placement or career tech courses? From there, they drill down even further to individual student lists to spot check the rosters and make sure everyone is exactly where they're supposed to be. And there's this really critical task that happens totally behind the scenes. It's basically a translation job. A school might have a cool name for a class, like environmental science and policy. But for the state, and more importantly for college admissions, that class has to be mapped to a specific, standardized state course code. Getting this translation right impacts everything, from how the school gets funded to whether a student's hard work counts for university requirements. Okay, now we're getting to what is arguably one of the most critical parts of this entire checkup. Let's call it the specialist visit. This is where the system audits whether a school is keeping its promise to provide legally required support for its English learner students. If you talk to any school leader about this report, there is one number, one column that they are absolutely laser focused on, column 10. This number tells them how many of their English learner students are not being reported as receiving any language support services in any of their classes. And the goal here? It's completely non-negotiable. As the official guidance says, getting this number down to 0 is a primary indicator of success. What that really means is that, on paper, every single English learner student has been accounted for and is getting the services they are legally entitled to.
And you have to understand, the stakes here are just incredibly high. A number bigger than 0 in that column isn't just a typo or data error. It represents a student who is potentially being left behind. It could mean there's a child sitting in a classroom right now without the support they desperately need to succeed. So this is basically how it's all coded in the system. You can see there are different ways students get support in their home language, in a special English class, or with support built right into their regular classes. But that one at the bottom, Code 5, no EL services, that's the big red flag. When a school sees a student with that code, it should trigger an immediate investigation to figure out what's going on and why they're being missed. So, we've walked through the whole physical exam. Now it's time to talk about the results. And believe me, this isn't just a bunch of paperwork that gets filed away in a cabinet somewhere. The outcome of this data checkup has real, very public consequences.
I mean, this data is a huge deal. It directly feeds into the California School Dashboard, which is basically the public report card that parents and the community see. It's used to automatically monitor teacher assignments, to make sure teachers have the right credentials. It ensures that their hard work is officially recognized. And it tracks whether students are getting access to the courses they need for college and for their future careers.
So, when you boil it all down, the Fall 2 report is so much more than just a bunch of numbers and codes. It is the official story a school tells about itself, to the state, to the public, and to its own community. Getting it right isn't just about being compliant. It's about telling a true and honest story. And that really leaves us with one final big question to think about. What story is your local school's data telling?